of the programs that are available to them for economic supports, and some of the issues associated with those programs as well. Um, but I do want to say right now we are in the process of doing, we're going to be putting out, I believe tomorrow, new data on how many businesses we expect to disappear before the end of the pandemic. And it is sadly a massive, massive number. There are loads and loads of entrepreneurs that are just not going to make it. Businesses that are going to lose everything out of that. And as I've pointed out to many in the media, losing your business is not like losing your job. For many business owners, they've invested, they don't start at zero when they lose their business. They start deeply in the hole because they may have remortgaged their home in order to get the business going. And so we really need to do everything we can as Canadians to support independent businesses, both personally, so ensuring that while governments are shutting down swaths of the business community, that we try as much as we can as Canadians to support local independent businesses, but also getting governments to support businesses. After all, the businesses that are shut down are not shut down because they made bad business decisions. They're not being shut down because they were, they picked a bad location. Uh, they're being shut down in order to protect society. And therefore, it's deeply unfair to expect business owners to eat the full cost of the negative economic effects that they are facing. I'll speak more about that in just a minute. On the program side, one thing I wanted to make everyone aware of is the Canada Summer Jobs Program. I think when people think about summer jobs, they think, well, that's ways out. I'm not going to be able to take advantage of it. But there is an application that's only open for another, 10 days or 9 days. But you can hire students now, and it'll cover wages between April of this year, April 26th, and February 22nd of next year. So it's far more than a summer jobs program. And it can now subsidize, as a result of a change that they've made during COVID, it can subsidize 75% of the wages of a student as opposed to 50%, which is normal. Part-time work is not typically allowed, but is now in this program, and that you are able to change the nature of the person's job once they are hired. And that's important because business owners are having to change everything so regularly, open, close, this way, that way, and the jobs that you have subsidized by government can keep up. So if you think you may have some jobs happening starting in the spring that a student could do, there is some support available to you, especially in an environment where wages are really, really tight for the budgets of most small businesses. And I invite you to check out that program. Here are a few links. I'll make sure that, well, in fact, I did send, I think my team did send this deck to your association. So we can, you guys can share this afterwards if you want any of these links for more information.
Got it.
On the business closure side, this has been a big source of my personal advocacy. I think I've toasted a few relationships with some people in Queen's Park, but for very good reason. Ontario has ridiculous rules in place for business closures, business lockdowns. And look, the average business person that I'm speaking to understands that we're still dealing with a deadly pandemic. Yes, there are some business owners that are saying, open everything up, let's go back to normal, but that's very small. That's a very small number of business owners. Most business owners understand that there need to be restrictions in place because we're dealing with something that is quite worrisome and can lead to death. They're on board for making changes and ensuring that they are taking care of both their employees and their customers, and have worked, in fact, invested significant amounts of money in ensuring that they can do just that. So when we saw the second round of lockdown, and business owners, sorry, I should say, in the spring of 2020, business owners were fairly understanding, even though that this was killing their businesses. They understood that governments needed to take quick action. They didn't know all the information about what was happening with COVID. I mean, so So they gave government, I think a lot of credit, a lot of understanding that these measures, while hard, were in fact in some, viewed as understandable given the circumstances. But things have changed. And now here we are in December, November and December, when the first round of lockdowns kicked in Toronto and Peel, and now have been expanded province-wide. Business owners are angry about the way that the Ford government has administered its business restrictions because they don't make any sense. As I pointed out thousands of times in the media over the last number of weeks, it is incredibly inappropriate that a small independent bookstore is not able to sell a book in store to two customers, but people can line up and go into the Costco with the big table of books and sift through them with people breathing over your neck. You can't buy a bouquet of flowers in store, a flower shop, but you can go into the Walmart and buy flowers at 10:30 at night. And last week, the government made it even worse by eliminating the business's ability to hand a product out their door through curbside pickup after 8 p.m. or deliver a product to the step of a homeowner after 8 p.m. Meanwhile, Amazon is allowed to deliver products at whatever hour they choose. And it's this unfairness that we have been seeking, that we've been seeking to solve for the last little while. Business owners understand that there need to be some restrictions, but my goodness, when I went into a small independent lighting store to fix a light fixture in my room, to buy a new light fixture for a bedroom in my house in North York, it was right before the Toronto lockdowns kicked in. I went up, I was the only customer in the store. There was the business owner and one employee. So there were three of us in the business. And as the business owner started to talk, I asked her about the implications of this. And she said to me, "What sense does this make? I have this big facility here. I'm not allowed to see a single customer in store as of Monday when the lockdowns kicked in. But my customers can line up at Home Depot and go in and buy light fixtures with a big crowd of people." And it's this unfairness that I think has really turned this from business owners that were unhappy about the rules but understood them to being angry about the rules, because governments have once again tipped the balance in favor of the big and against the small. And so one of the reasons why we've been so publicly critical of the Ford government, it's not that I think that Doug Ford takes any pleasure in shutting down businesses or has some form of hidden agenda here, but this unfairness that has been created, I think, is something that desperately needs to be fixed. So we have a petition going on right now to try to ensure that the government puts in place a small business first COVID retail strategy. I know not all of you are in the retail sector, but I should say, we think that this is an important principle. We think that small firms should be allowed to serve limited number of customers at one time in store. Allow us to sell to 3 customers at a time or 2 customers at a time or by appointment. And we think that that would be a much fairer way of dealing with the lockdowns. I was happy to hear, and Andrea, thank you very much for mentioning this. But just a quick reminder, it looks like you guys are well aware of the new Ontario Small Business Grant that just opened up on Friday. Eligible small businesses, the grant's providing $10,000 to $20,000. There's a list of sectors, but really anybody that has been affected by the business restrictions that came in province-wide in December should be eligible for this program. We are working right now, though, to open that up, because there are a bunch of businesses that have been affected not because of the business restrictions, but because of the restrictions on their customers. The fact that the Ontario government has ordered everyone to stay at home has meant a drop in demand from so many businesses, and that is one of the things that does need to change with this program. Also, businesses that were shut down for in earlier phases, that needs to be opened up as well. But it is a good program. Importantly, they've allowed access to new businesses, which was, and new firms were excluded from virtually all of the federal grant and support programs that were out there. I'll talk about those in a second, but that is a big one. You're supposed to have had a decline in sales from April of 2020 to April of 2019 of 20% or more. You can get, if your losses are bigger, you can get up to $20,000 out of this one-time grant. But I will say there are other formulas. You don't have to use April as your comparison if you don't have an April 2019. There are other ways to compare your revenue impact in order to gain access to this program. So that it is live now, but it took a lot of work to get the government across this finish line. Most provinces had a program like this months ago and really had to shame the Ontario government to try to issue one themselves. I will say the other programs that have gone unnoticed is there is a proper, when you apply for this Ontario Small Business Grant, and I invite you to check it out, you can at the same time on the same portal apply for two other provincial programs. One of them is they don't have a good name for it, but it's the program to provide a rebate for property taxes and for energy costs. And so for businesses that are eligible for the grant, they can also at the same time apply for this property tax and an energy costs rebate program. That's the $600 million program that Ford's spoken about many times. And I have to tell you, apparently only about 6,000 Ontario businesses have applied for that program. And there are tens of thousands of businesses across the province. So it's really undersubscribed. And I think you should check it out because there's money sitting on the table there for business owners across the province. The third program Ontario offered is a PPE grant for all the protective equipment and barriers and everything else that businesses had. It's only $1,000. And unfortunately, it's limited between 2 and 9 employees. We're trying to get that open for businesses that have no staff at all, that are sole proprietors, because they've had costs associated with PPE as well. And it's only for certain sectors. So there needs to be a broader application of this program, and we're pushing for that in real time. At the federal level, where I've spent on my side, my Ontario team has been focused on the Ontario programs. I've spent a great deal of my time on pushing for either the creation of or changes to federal support programs for small business. And I'll whip through this really fast. But one thing I do want to note is that the SBA loan program, remember that was the program that provided $40,000 loans to small business owners. Up to $10,000 of that loan is forgivable. Essentially, it becomes a grant if you repay the balance of the $30,000 successfully. But that has now been expanded to $60,000. We said to the federal government, $40,000 may have looked like a lot of money for a small business at the beginning of a pandemic, but given that this is now month 9 or 10 of the pandemic, we need greater economic support. They added another $20,000 to the loan, another $10,000, so half of that additional loan is forgivable. So you can now get a $60,000 loan, of which $20,000 is forgivable. You get to keep the $20,000. And I will say many business owners have applied for this, not all. 800,000 businesses across Canada applied for the SBA loan, so it was pretty broad take-up, but far fewer of them have applied for the second tier. We have, though, started to hear from business owners right away that they were getting unsuccessful notices, not successful notices from their bank. About 10% of claimants apparently have received that as a notification. That does not mean that your loan is denied. It means that the government needs more information and that the process to do that is being set up in January. We're pushing government to ensure that that happens quickly so that decisions can be made and money can start to flow very, very quickly through the banks on that front. Of course, the first subsidy program that was announced was the wage subsidy. It still is available. It was now just bumped back up from 65% to a maximum of 75%. Now that's available if your sales have dropped by 70% or more, but there is still the wage subsidy out there. It still has many gaps and it's continuing until June of 2021. The other program where we spent a ton of time is ensuring that there's a proper support program for rent. Remember in the spring, there was the CECRA loan program, but it was a complete failure. We pushed Bill Morneau, the finance minister at the time, to make changes to it. He was in love with his program. It just wasn't working because, of course, landlords were required to participate, and they had to apply for a loan from CMHC in order to fund a grant or a subsidy to the small business that rented from them. Most landlords took a pass on the program altogether. Some used it, but very, very few used the program at all because of its design. We pushed, and fortunately, Chrystia Freeland became Minister of Finance, and she agreed that the program was not working, and now has put in place a program where up to 65% of rent is subsidized by government if you've seen, depending on your level of business loss. If your business has been shut down again by order, and of course, most Ontario businesses, or many Ontario businesses, are in that boat, you can get up to 90% of your rent subsidized by the federal government. And that program is also going to be in place until June of 2021. But there are problems with all of the federal programs. One of them is that access for new firms is impossible because you have to compare to a previous month. And if you weren't around at that time, you didn't get it. You didn't have a business number, you can't qualify. If you don't have a tax return from 2019, you don't qualify. So there are all these exemptions cutting out thousands and thousands of businesses from accessing these programs, including seasonal firms and sole proprietors. So we have pushed to try to get the federal government to make major changes to its formula. I'm actually optimistic that something may be coming. We've been raising this every single day in Ottawa to try to get the federal government to understand these new businesses. We desperately need them. If we're going to get the economy back on track, if we want people to have jobs to come back to, if you punish the very people that are taking the risks right before COVID, that have no track record, that haven't been able to build a nest egg, these are the most vulnerable businesses, but also can be a huge source of getting Canada out of the problem that it finds itself in from an economic perspective. The government seems to be finally listening. So with enough pushing, we may be able to make that happen. I want to leave some time for questions. These are some of the other gaps that we're seeing in the programs. The CEBA loan program needs some significant fixes. The CERS program for the rent, we have problems where some companies have holding companies and operating companies, and they're not able to access this. Business owners need an income right now too, and the wage subsidy, if you've taken money out through dividends, it doesn't help you. So we're pushing for a change there. Also, we need better access to some of these provincial programs, as I mentioned. I should let you know that CFIB is offering right now, for those that are not in a position to pay us a membership fee, we are offering free service as long as the pandemic is going on. We do weekly webinars like what I'm doing right now with business owners to help walk them through all of the programs and the changes. We've got one, in fact, coming up with CRA next week. So through this deck, you can find links to that. And I'll just wrap it up by saying there are all sorts of resources available to you through my association. So please do check us out in social media or online. Happy to help you, including taking direct calls from you to our counselors in order to provide direct support. Last point for me, this has been an incredible and an existential challenge for small business owners across the country. And we're going to have a few dark months ahead of us. Dr. Williams yesterday said that he doesn't want to open up the economy unless there are fewer than 1,000 COVID cases in the province. And that feels like it's a long way off, even though there was a decline just yesterday in the overall COVID numbers. I think we need to push government to find pathways for us to safely reopen businesses with limited capacity. But on top of that, my main message is brighter days are here. They may not be here in the next month or two, but they're coming. Vaccines are going to take hold. And yes, there are some worries about variants and keeping up with the track record, but they're going to come. And Canada desperately needs courageous entrepreneurs like you to stick with your businesses and to try to make it through across the COVID finish line. And I just wanted you to know that if nobody else is going to say it, I want to say it. Thank you for all the work that you have done to try to keep your businesses going, where you have staff, to keep them going as much as you possibly can, to keep our economy functioning. We need you. We're going to need you. So I'm hoping that that all of you in the Scarborough Business Association can make it through to the COVID finish line. And my association pledges to be there to help you in any way we possibly can. Thank you so much for your attention.
Well, Dan, that was tremendous. Thank you for that update. You're right. So much has changed since June, has it not?
Sure has.
Boy, oh boy. And we know more, but in some ways we know less because of the uncertainty out there as well. And advocates such as yourself are very important to the system. We have a few questions. I'm wondering, first off, if you could just give us a snapshot of the type of businesses you think are affected most drastically.
Yes. So the biggest impact, of course, was on those for whom that see customers face to face in their business as a normal part of their operations. Those are the ones that were most directly and immediately affected when COVID hit, and unfortunately during this second wave are also shut down again. So that includes the retail sector, the hospitality sector. Of course, we've talked extensively about, Canadians have been talking extensively about restaurants, hotels, and others in the hospitality sector. Arts and recreational businesses, though, gosh, I mean, we've got escape rooms that have been shut down forever. We've got any kind of resort or kids activities, they've been closed forever. So retail, hospitality, the service sector, the service sector more broadly. So that includes salons and nail salon, spas, and those businesses. Anybody for whom face-to-face contact or physical contact with a customer is important. Those are the ones that have become most and that have been most directly affected by COVID and are the ones that desperately need our support.
Very good. I have a question about some of the programs. So many of the programs, you have to show, as you said, a 20% drop in revenue from, I think you said April 19 to April 20.
Yes.
We're now landing in a zone where we're headed to April 21. Yeah. How do you suspect that those kinds of evaluations might change?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the provincial program should be okay because it's a one-time grant, and you don't have to use April. There are, for new firms and others and seasonal businesses, as I mentioned, there are other comparator months that you're able to use to estimate your revenue losses. But it's the federal programs that are really going to get into trouble really soon, because what do you do in March or April of 2021? What do you compare it against? To your sales in March or April of 2020? Well, you're not likely to show a loss compared to 2020 because 2020 was a disaster. So we suspect that they may use 2019 as the comparator month for access to the programs. But on top of that, they need to change those other rules so that firms that weren't around in 2019 or were just getting started, we need to find other pathways for them.
Boy, it's going to get tougher all the time, is it not?
It is. And look, I will say, this is where I am sympathetic to government. They had to create programs out of thin air, right? Like, I mean, there was no roadmap here to do that. So I understand in the beginning why these programs took some time to get up and running, even though there was this emergency. Where I'm less forgiving is we've now had 9 months, and we should be able to do a better job than we have been doing in getting these changes implemented, and that has been slow.
You've had some significant areas and obviously significant discussions over specific programs at various levels of government. What generally is the response to the unfairness that you brought to them?
It really depends. Look, I have to admit, Doug Ford, that did have started out with a small business focus and orientation. We invited him to CFIB's AGM as a guest speaker. Our members were super happy to hear from the Premier. There had been lots of good small business changes that his government had made. But, speaking very frankly, I'm getting tired of the crocodile tears saying how much he feels for small businesses while creating policies that are punishing small businesses at the same time as allowing big guys to remain open. It's made no sense to me. And his reasoning to allow, we have to let Walmart and Costco stay open because of their supply chain issues. Well, small businesses have supply chain issues too. And then it was that, well, one-stop shopping is better than multiple stop shopping. Well, I'm sorry, there's a lot more safety, COVID safety, walking into the average small business where the business owner or staff person can see every customer at a time to ensure that they're wearing their mask than walking in some big cavernous big box store where people can do whatever the heck they want behind the aisles and nobody's going to know any different. And this is the reason why they're doing it. Like, business, as I said before, business owners get that there need to be some restrictions and are on board for that. What they don't want is policies in place that don't make any sense. And so much of the rules right now really don't make any sense at all. Especially providing they say, get this, for delivery after 8:00 p.m. You as the business are not allowed to deliver it, even if the customer lives 2 doors from your business after 8:00. You're not allowed to do that. That's clear. But if you hire a courier, they can come into your business, pick up your product, and then take it and deliver it to the person a couple of doors down. Well, I'm sorry, that's going to lead to more COVID exposure as the courier has to come into your business to pick it up. So clearly they haven't thought these things through. So I have to admit, at the Ford level, many are sympathetic, but are locked in to a certain way of thinking. At the federal level, we haven't always gotten along well with the federal government. Many of you will know that my association hit them hard in 2017 when Bill Morneau made these small business tax changes. So they weren't our best friends. I will say Chrystia Freeland has been listening and making changes in real time, slow, but they are getting there, and I give them credit for that. I would not be described as the Trudeau government's biggest fan generally, but they have been listening more and more to our members over the course of the last number of months.
An interesting turn. I want to go on to self-employed contractors. Obviously, they have special challenges and they're not covered even for programs like the PPE grant or wage subsidies. What do you say to them?
This is one of the big changes that we've needed to make, and self-employed people have real reasons to be pissed off. Sorry, to be unhappy.
You're passionate. That's okay.
No, but look, what we've been saying to small business to self-employed people is, okay, you can go and use the CERB or now the CRB program under EI. We'll give you access there. But when the government made mistakes and gave incomplete information at the beginning, now we're punishing them with audits and recalling those dollars. So we're cutting them out of programs that are oriented for workers, and we're cutting them out of programs oriented at businesses with paid staff. Well, we can't do both. Either give self-employed people full access to the supports that are oriented for workers, or full access to the support programs that are oriented at business owners. That's what we've been saying. In addition to that, as I mentioned very quickly, we need to have supports for business owners to have an income. And that seems to have been missed by governments. Yes, they'll support your wages or your rent, but what is the business owner supposed to draw from to pay the bills for themselves and their own family along the way? And that really, in our view, you can use your own wages. If you have paid staff and you pay yourself a salary, you can get that salary subsidized through the wage subsidy. But if you pay yourself through dividends, which many business owners do, that is absolutely out. And we've been pushing to allow a change, not to allow them to pay themselves any amount of dividends they like, but at least have subsidized a similar amount of dividends to an employee's salary. We figured that would be a fair way to do that.
The complexity everywhere you turn, it's a lot.
It really is.
I have a question for you here. Many of the small retail businesses in Scarborough employ newcomer Canadians, trying to make a new start in Canada. And there could be an issue with the folks going on social assistance, which they don't want to do. They're hardworking, look to make strong contribution in their new country. Is there any recognition of this?
So look, the groups, from an employee perspective, the groups that have been hardest hit are women, people of color, new immigrants to Canada. These are the groups, the data shows that those groups, because they often are working in retail, hospitality, the service sector, arts and recreational businesses, those are sectors where employment among some of those typically disadvantaged groups is particularly high. So the very groups that are struggling to gain an access to get a toehold into the Canadian labor market have been punished by these policies. And I've talked, like when the new lockdowns came in Ontario right before Christmas, I can't tell you how many business owners I talked to who were in tears that they had to lay off another round of staff right before Christmas, knowing that this is the source of income for these folks, and they're going to struggle to gain access to some of the government support programs. They're not going to know about them, perhaps, and so this is one of the reasons why we've been pushing for a safe pathway to try to keep as many businesses open with restrictions, but open as we can. And we're pushing right now to try to say, please don't wait for 1,000 cases. Look, what gives me optimism is that while vaccines have slowed down, vaccine distribution has slowed down, we have done, I think, a reasonably good job of getting vaccines to emergency services workers and to people in personal care homes. Once that's happened and that takes hold, one hopes that the hospitalization rate and death rate from COVID starts to drop. If there are larger numbers in the general population, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but we probably can manage our way through that while allowing some parts of the economy to begin to reopen. And that's what I'm pushing for, is that we've got to manage COVID, to shut down the economy tight until everybody's been vaccinated. Canadians are not going to have jobs to come back to if we do that. And those very groups you mentioned, they are going to be punished the hardest.
What can the CFIB do to help tenants who landlords are getting support, but they're not passing any of it down to tenants?
Well,
what can the CFIB do to support small business there?
Yes, so we've already done the biggest piece, and that is to take the landlord out altogether from the new rent subsidy. So for those that the question may have been about the previous rent support program, SECRA, which did require the landlord's participation. The new program that went into effect for September, October, November, December, and will go all the way up to June, requires no landlord participation whatsoever. We do have an issue right now, though, and we're trying to solve it, that if you reuse the rent subsidy, it is expected that you're paying your rent in full to your landlord. And so what we've said to the government is, okay, it's reasonable. If you apply for a rent subsidy and you get 40% of your rent covered, it's reasonable to expect that you're going to use that 40% to pay the rent to the landlord. That makes sense. I mean, the government's giving you a subsidy for rent. You can't then use it to buy inventory. But if you expect business owners to pay their rent in full while they're shut down, if they're only getting a 40% rent subsidy, that's unrealistic. Make them, ensure that they use the subsidy to pay their rent. But if their rent is $10,000 and they're only able to pay $4,000, which is subsidized, give the landlord the $4,000 and then allow us to defer the rest until such time as businesses can see brighter days.
Right. Now, we're almost out of time. I have one more question, a wrap-up question for you, Dan. And with all of this going on, what is your outlook for small business in 2021?
Look, for businesses that are going to be able to survive, we are expecting in many of those sectors, not all, there to be a bit of a boom once the restrictions are lifted. People have been caged up for months on end. And I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to being able to go and sit in a restaurant once again, to go to a movie, to enjoy some of the nice things about life. Gosh, I mean, as a practicing Catholic, I didn't think that I would miss going to weekly mass as much as I have right now. I'm looking forward to do anything outside of my house these days. So I gotta say, I think there is going to be a little bit of a post-COVID boom for the businesses that have been that have made it across the finish line. Plus, remember, for those businesses, sadly, many of their competitors may not have made it. And so there will be fewer businesses and some pent-up demand. So they may have some good months ahead. If you're a salaried employee or a government worker, you've actually done pretty well during COVID. And so you haven't taken vacations and all the rest of it, other than government officials. You probably have a few extra bucks in the bank, and that money will start to hit the economy once COVID comes out. So we'll see a little bit of that. What I worry about, though, is that there's a lot of sustained damage for businesses over the last little while. Businesses that are sitting on a mountain of debt, COVID-related debt. So for the months that they didn't have a rent subsidy, they may have the average small business, we estimate, has $100,000 in COVID-related debt. So they got to, when they return to business and see their customers again, they've got to make enough that month to pay their current bills and to try to make a dent in the debt that they will have inherited. And so we really need to make sure, and we're pushing for some programs to help relieve the debt burden that businesses have been facing during the COVID, allow them to write off or to perhaps even get rebates of some of their losses, may be one way to do this. But we're thinking right now about what kind of recovery measures may be necessary. What we don't want governments to do is there's talk about big stimulus spending. If they do that too early, all of those stimulus dollars that might go to Canadians to spend post-COVID will go to Amazon and Walmart and Costco as people go and buy a new treadmill or something else. We need to make sure small businesses are open before we start anything that will stimulate the economy.
Well, that's very good. I know that we really have shifted our focus at the SBA from being amid this thing to recovery and resilience. And so that's a very interesting outlook. I even find if I tilt my head sideways, I see light at the end of the tunnel there. So thank you for that. Thank you, Dan Kelly. It's been informative. Our second speech with you, Dan Kelly, the President and CEO of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Well done. And you can always tell because most everybody stuck around for the entire session, which is much appreciated. Thanks to the audience today for coming out for this, our first virtual breakfast of the new year. I want to turn your attention to two other events we have this month. Next Wednesday, we have our next After 5, which has turned into a really good working session, good session to share what with others about your business and to share ideas about how we can all get through this. That's next Wednesday. You can find the details on the website. And our next speaker breakfast is 2 weeks on February the 3rd with Dolly Began, and it's Saving Scarborough Business, speaking on child care support programs and recovery. We hope to see you at all these events. We know that we all work together as a unit. We do much better. And please, if you haven't already, join the SBA. Thanks again to you all. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dan.
Everyone.
We'll
Thank
see
you,
you
Dan.
again.
Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Dan.
Be safe, everyone.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, it was good.